Welcome, friend. Tonight you'll discover a powerful secret that Buddhist monks have used for centuries to quiet the restless mind and find deep, meaningful rest. In the stillness of this moment, as the day gently fades behind you, we begin a journey through wisdom that has helped countless seekers soften their thoughts and release the weight they carry. I'm going to share 10 remarkable Zen stories, each one simple on the surface, yet profound in its depth. These stories have guided millions toward clarity, toward understanding, and toward a kind of peace that does not depend on circumstances. Within each story lies a quiet key, a way of seeing that gently unlocks the mind's natural ability to let go of stress and worry. The Buddha once said, "Peace comes from within. Do not seek it without." Over the next few hours, you'll begin to understand what this truly means, not as an idea to grasp, but as an experience to feel. As we move from story to story, you may notice your breath slowing, your body growing heavier, and your thoughts gradually settling like leaves on still water. Here on the long night, we do not rush towards sleep. We allow it to arrive naturally, carried by reflection and quiet understanding. So, make yourself comfortable. Let your body rest fully. And as you listen, allow these ancient teachings to guide you gently inward. Let us begin. Our first story takes place by a peaceful river, where a quiet lesson about the nature of our reactions waits to be discovered. It is a simple story, yet within its simplicity lies a profound truth about the way we experience anger, frustration, and hurt. There once was a man who loved to row his small wooden boat along a calm river at the end of each day. The river was wide and gentle, reflecting the colors of the sky as the sun lowered itself toward the horizon. In those moments, drifting across the surface of the water, he felt a sense of ease that he rarely found elsewhere. The world seemed slower there. The noise of daily life faded into the distance, replaced by the soft sound of water touching wood and the faint whisper of wind moving through reeds along the bank. Every evening, as golden light spread across the river, he would untie his boat and push away from the shore. He did not row with urgency. He did not seek a destination. He simply allowed himself to float, sometimes guiding the boat gently with his oars, sometimes letting the current carry him where it would. These quiet journeys became his refuge, a small ritual of solitude and peace. One evening, as he drifted in the fading light, he noticed another boat in the distance. At first, it appeared as little more than a dark shape resting on the water. He paid it no special attention. Boats often passed along this stretch of river, and there was plenty of room for both to move freely. But as minutes passed, he realized something unusual. The other boat was not turning. It was not adjusting its course. Instead, it seemed to be coming directly toward him. He lifted his head and narrowed his eyes, trying to see who was steering. The light was dimming, and the river's surface shimmered with reflected color, making it difficult to distinguish details. Still, he assumed that whoever was in the approaching boat would notice him soon enough and steer away. He waited. The distance between them grew smaller. A faint tension stirred in his chest. He called out across the water, his voice echoing softly over the river. "Be careful," he shouted. "You're heading straight toward me." There was no reply. The boat continued forward. His irritation began to rise. Surely the other person could see him. Surely they understood the risk of collision. Why were they not adjusting their direction? Why were they ignoring him? He raised his voice again, louder this time. "Turn aside. You're going to crash into me. Still nothing." The approaching boat moved steadily, carried either by careless steering or by a current he could not see. The man felt heat spreading through his body. What had begun as a mild annoyance now sharpened into anger. His peaceful evening was dissolving into frustration. In his mind, a story was already forming. The unseen boater must be reckless, perhaps arrogant, perhaps indifferent to the safety of others. The more the boat advanced, the more vivid this imagined figure became. At last, with no sign of change from the other vessel, the two boats collided with a dull, jarring sound. Wood struck wood, and ripples spread across the once still surface of the river. The man leapt to his feet, fury ready to burst from his lips. He was prepared to unleash his anger on the stranger, whose carelessness had shattered his tranquility. But as he looked into the other boat, his anger halted. There was no one there. The boat was empty. It had not been steered toward him in arrogance or negligence. It had simply drifted with the current, guided by forces unseen and indifferent. There was no face to confront, no intention to accuse, no person to blame. In that instant, the man felt his anger dissolve. The heat that had filled his chest cooled. The tension in his body softened. He sat down slowly, almost embarrassed by the intensity of the reaction he had been ready to unleash. What had changed? The boats had still collided. The impact had still disturbed the water. The circumstances were identical to what they had been moments before. Only one thing was different: his understanding. The story he had constructed in his mind vanished the moment he saw the truth. Without intention, without a target for blame, his anger could not sustain itself. And as he floated once more upon the quiet river, he began to glimpse something important about the nature of his own mind. The lesson of the empty boat is not that collisions will stop happening. Life will still bump against us in unexpected ways. Words will still land awkwardly. Plans will still be interrupted. Yet suffering often begins not with what happens, but with what we believe about why it happened. When the man saw another boat coming toward him, his mind searched for intention. It assumed a person. It assigned motive. Once motive was assigned, ego arose to defend itself. In a single breath, a peaceful evening turned into a conflict of imagined disrespect. Then the boat was revealed to be empty and the conflict vanished. This is why the Buddha's teaching feels so immediate and practical. You will not be punished for your anger. You will be punished by your anger. Anger burns first in the one who carries it. It tightens the body, clouds the judgment, and steals the quiet of the present moment. Much of our daily suffering follows the same pattern. A driver cuts into our lane and we assume hostility. A colleague fails to greet us and we assume indifference. A friend does not reply and we assume rejection. The event itself may be small, but the story we add can grow large and heavy. Zen invites us to pause before the story hardens into certainty. It asks us to notice how quickly the ego makes everything personal, how swiftly it says, "This is about me." Yet how often do we truly know another's intention? How often are we reacting to a shadow on the water, mistaking it for a deliberate hand at the oar? Dogen expressed this insight with clarity to study the Buddha. Way is to study the self, and to study the self is to forget the self. To forget the self does not mean to disappear. It means to loosen the tight grip of me at the center of every experience. When that grip softens, space appears, space for patience, for understanding, and for peace. Another teaching offers a vivid image. Holding on to anger is like grasping a hot coal with the intent of throwing it at someone else. You are the one who gets burned. The man on the river discovered this truth without argument. When he saw that the boat was empty, there was nothing left to throw the coal at. So he released it. Tonight you may gently consider your own empty boats. Recall a recent irritation, a moment when you felt slighted or misunderstood. Notice what the mind added to the bare event. Notice the imagined motives, the silent accusations. Then ask with quiet honesty whether the boat might have been emptier than it first appeared. This does not require you to deny pain or excuse harm. It simply asks you to examine the story before you carry it into the night. Often peace returns not because the world changes, but because our interpretation softens. If you feel tension rising in the body even now, let your shoulders relax. Let your jaw unclench. Take one slow breath and allow the exhale to be longer than the inhale. In that small pause, the mind can loosen its grip. In that pause, the river becomes still again. The empty boat drifts away, and the water settles. Leaving the quiet river behind, we now turn toward a mountain path where another lesson waits to unfold. Leaving the quiet river behind, we now turn toward a narrow mountain path where another lesson quietly waits. High in the mountains, where the air grows thinner and the scent of pine drifts through the wind, there lived a monk who often walked alone along a rugged trail carved into the side of a cliff. His monastery rested deep within the forest, surrounded by ancient trees and stone, and each day he wandered beyond its gates to meditate among the shifting light and shadow of the natural world. He walked slowly, not out of weakness, but out of awareness. Each step touched the earth with care. The sound of gravel beneath his sandals blended with the rustle of leaves overhead. In those moments, there was nothing to achieve, nowhere urgent to arrive. There was only the rhythm of breath and the steady rise and fall of the path beneath his feet. On one such afternoon, as the sun began to descend and long shadows stretched across the mountainside, the stillness broke. A deep roar echoed through the forest. It was sudden and unmistakable. The monk stopped. The sound reverberated against the stone walls of the ravine, vibrating through the air and into his body. Birds burst from the treetops. The quiet of the mountain shattered. Then he saw it. From between the trees emerged a tiger, large and powerful, its muscles coiled beneath striped fur. Its golden eyes were fixed directly on him. There was no confusion in its gaze, no hesitation. It had chosen him. For a brief moment, monk and tiger stood facing one another. Then the tiger moved. The monk turned and ran. His robes lifted behind him as he hurried along the narrow path, his breath suddenly sharp and urgent. Stones slipped beneath his feet. The roar came again, closer this time, followed by the heavy thud of paws, striking earth. The path curved dangerously along the edge of a steep cliff. On one side, jagged rock rose upward. On the other, open air dropped into a vast ravine below. There was nowhere to hide, nowhere to step aside. The tiger's presence filled the space behind him, like a wave gathering force. The monk's heart pounded. Instinct had taken over. He was no longer walking in calm meditation. He was fleeing for his life. As he rounded a bend in the path, He saw that the trail ended abruptly at the edge of the cliff. There was no bridge, no downward path, only empty space and the distant rocks below. Behind him, the tiger advanced. In that instant, the monk's eyes caught sight of a thick vine hanging down the face of the cliff. Without allowing himself time to think, he grasped it firmly and swung his body over the edge, lowering himself down the rock face. His feet scraped against stone as he descended. Pebbles tumbled past him and disappeared into the ravine. The tiger above paced at the cliff's edge, snarling its claws scraping against rock as it searched for a way to reach him. The monk clung tightly to the vine suspended in midair. Only then did he look down. Far below at the bottom of the ravine, another tiger waited. It moved slowly back and forth, its tail swaying lazily, as if it had all the time in the world. Its eyes, too, were fixed upward. The monk was trapped. Above him, death. Below him, death. He hung between them, suspended by nothing more than a single vine, rooted somewhere beyond his sight. His arms trembled with effort. His breath came in uneven waves. The muscles in his hands burned as he tightened his grip. And then he heard another sound, a small, persistent gnawing. He turned his head slightly and saw two tiny mice scurrying along the vine just above his hands. One was white, the other was black. They took turns nibbling at the fibers of the vine, their small teeth working steadily, almost methodically. Back and forth they moved, white and black, day and night, time itself quietly wearing down the thread upon which he hung. The monk watched them for a moment, and in that suspended space between sky and earth, something shifted within him. He could not climb up. The tiger above waited. He could not drop down. The tiger below paced patiently. He could not stop the mice. He could not command the mountain. He could not reason with the tigers. Everything that might once have given him a sense of control had fallen away. There was only the vine in his hands, the cliff at his back, and the vast emptiness stretching in both directions. The wind brushed against his face. His breath began to slow. The immediate panic, sharp and electric, softened into a strange clarity. The situation had not changed. The danger remained absolute. Yet something within him stopped struggling against what was already true. He felt the texture of the vine against his palms. He noticed the warmth of the sun against his skin. He heard the distant cry of a bird circling high above the ravine. And there, growing from a small crack in the rock face beside him, he saw something unexpected. A single wild strawberry, bright red, perfectly ripe. Its color stood in vivid contrast to the gray stone surrounding it. Against all logic, in the middle of terror and uncertainty, life had produced something small and beautiful. The monk loosened one hand from the vine. Carefully, deliberately, he reached toward the fruit. His fingers brushed against its surface. It was cool and firm. With gentle precision, he plucked it from the stem. Still hanging between two tigers, still aware of the mice gnawing steadily above him, he brought the strawberry to his lips. He tasted it. It was sweet. Still suspended between the two tigers, the monk tasted the sweetness of the strawberry. For a brief and luminous instant, the world narrowed to a single sensation. The roughness of the vine beneath his fingers, the warmth of sunlight resting against his cheek, the cool burst of sweetness spreading across his tongue. Nothing about his circumstances had changed. Above him, Danger remained. Below him, danger waited. The mice continued their steady work, white and black, taking turns in a rhythm older than fear itself. Yet within that suspended moment, something remarkable unfolded. The monk was fully present. The story is not meant to deny fear nor to pretend that danger disappears when we close our eyes. The tigers are real. The cliff is real. The vine is fragile. Time moves whether we acknowledge it or not. But the teaching hidden within this moment asks a different question. Where does suffering truly live? Often it lives in the mind's attempt to escape what is already happening. When the monk first saw the tiger, his body reacted with instinct. He ran. He grasped the vine. He fought to survive. These responses were natural. Yet once he hung suspended between the two threats, there was no further strategy available. Panic could not lengthen the vine. Fear could not silence the mice. Worry could not persuade the tigers to disappear. In that recognition, struggle began to soften. So much of human anxiety arises from this same pattern. We replay the past, wishing to change what has already unfolded. We rehearse the future, imagining disasters that have not yet arrived. We hang between memory and anticipation, gripped by what was and what might be. The white mouse and the black mouse continue their work day and night, marking the steady passage of time. Each sunrise, each sunset, each breath quietly shortens the vine of our own lives. We know this in theory, yet we live as though the vine were permanent. We behave as though tomorrow were guaranteed. The monk, however, had no such illusion. He could see clearly that the vine would not last forever. The future was uncertain. The past was irrelevant. There was only this suspended moment, bright and undeniable. And in that moment there was a strawberry. The Buddha taught, do not dwell in the past. Do not dream of the future. Concentrate the mind on the present moment. This teaching is not abstract philosophy. It is a direct invitation to return to what is already here. The present moment is often simple. It may even be quiet. Yet the mind resists it, preferring dramatic stories of loss and gain. Hanging between two tigers, the monk could have surrendered to despair. He could have filled his final moments with regret or terror. Instead, he tasted what was available: sweetness. In your own life, the tigers may not have stripes or claws. They may take the form of unpaid bills, unresolved conversations, uncertain diagnoses, or the quiet fear of being misunderstood. The mice may be the passing years, the calendar pages turning the subtle signs of aging in the mirror. The vine may be your sense of stability, sometimes strong, sometimes fragile. And yet even here, even now, there is always a strawberry. Perhaps it is the steady rhythm of your breathing. Perhaps it is the softness of the pillow beneath your head. Perhaps it is the warmth of the blanket covering your body. The mind may insist on racing toward the cliff's edge, but awareness can return to something small and immediate. The monk's act was not reckless optimism. He did not deny reality. He did not declare himself safe. He simply chose to inhabit the only moment he truly possessed. When we resist, the present tension grows. When we accept it even briefly, something opens. The body softens, the breath deepens, the relentless forward momentum of thought slows, just enough to reveal a quiet space underneath. Presence does not guarantee safety. It does not eliminate uncertainty. But it transforms the quality of experience. Instead of hanging between imagined disasters, we rest in what is tangible and real. Tonight, as you listen, you may notice your own mind moving toward tomorrow. You may feel it revisiting something from earlier today. Gently, without judgment, bring it back. Feel the air entering your lungs. Feel it leaving. Notice the weight of your body supported by the bed. This is your strawberry. Even if sleep feels distant, this moment is complete. Nothing is missing from it. The mind may argue otherwise, but the body knows how to rest when it is not pulled between past and future. The monk did not conquer the tigers. He did not defeat time. He did not escape the cliff. He simply tasted the fruit before him. And in doing so, he revealed a freedom that exists independent of circumstance. Freedom is not always found in changing the situation. Often, it is found in changing our relationship to the moment. As the mice continue their quiet work, as the wind moves across the mountain face, as the tigers wait above and below, the monk remains suspended, yet no longer consumed by fear. The sweetness lingers. Eventually, the story fades, as all stories do. The image of the cliff dissolves. The mountain grows quiet once more. What remains is the teaching. Wherever you are, whatever surrounds you, there is something immediate and alive within reach. When attention rests, their suffering loosens its grip. From the mountain path, we now turn toward another lesson, one that explores the illusion of control and the quiet strength of letting go. From the mountain path, we now move toward a quiet monastery courtyard, where another subtle lesson unfolds, not about fear, but about control. In a small village at the foot of the mountains, there once lived a respected scholar who had spent many years studying sacred texts. He had memorized verses, debated philosophy, and written careful commentaries on the teachings of the Buddha. His reputation for intelligence was widely known, and he carried himself with quiet confidence. Yet despite his knowledge, he felt something unsettled within him. The teachings he studied spoke of peace, clarity, and freedom from suffering, but his own mind often remained restless. He analyzed his thoughts endlessly, trying to understand them, trying to master them, trying to bring them into order. The more he tried to control his inner world, the more complicated it seemed to become. One day he decided to visit a Zen master who lived in a nearby monastery. The master was known not for scholarly debate, but for a calm presence that seemed to quiet those around him. The scholar believed that perhaps through discussion, he might finally grasp the missing piece. When he arrived at the monastery, he found the master sitting in the courtyard, slowly pouring tea into a simple ceramic cup. The air was cool. Leaves drifted across the stones. The master looked up and greeted the scholar with a gentle nod. "I have come to learn from you," the scholar said, bowing respectfully. "I have studied many teachings, but I still feel I lack true understanding. Please instruct me." The master gestured for him to sit and began pouring tea into the scholar's cup. The tea flowed steadily, filling the cup to the brim, and then it kept flowing. The liquid rose above the rim and spilled over the sides, streaming onto the ground beneath them. The scholar watched in confusion as the master continued pouring. "Stop!" the scholar exclaimed. "The cup is already full. It cannot hold any more." The master finally set the teapot down. "Just like this cup," he said calmly. "You are full of your own ideas, your own conclusions, your own need to control what understanding should look like. How can I show you anything new if you are already full?" The scholar sat in silence. He had come expecting complex instruction, careful reasoning, perhaps a subtle philosophical insight. Instead, he was confronted with something disarmingly simple. The tea soaking into the earth at his feet felt like a quiet mirror of his own effort, always pouring more information, more analysis, more strategies into a mind that had no space left. Control often disguises itself as diligence. We believe that if we think carefully enough, plan thoroughly enough, manage precisely enough, we can secure peace. We try to arrange our schedules perfectly. We rehearse conversations in advance. We analyze outcomes before they occur. We attempt to control not only events, but also the way we feel about them. Yet, the more tightly we grip, the more tension we create. The scholar's struggle was not ignorance. It was attachment to certainty, to mastery, to the idea that understanding must be constructed and defended. His mind was busy, not empty. It was crowded with effort. As he sat there watching the last drops of tea fall from the cup, something softened. He realized that true learning might require something different from accumulation. It might require subtraction. To empty a cup is not to destroy it, it is to prepare it. In the same way, letting go of control does not mean abandoning responsibility. It means recognizing the limits of what can be shaped by force. The wind cannot be commanded. The seasons cannot be hurried. Thoughts cannot be bullied into silence. The master did not offer further explanation. He simply refilled the cup this time, stopping before it overflowed, and handed it to the scholar. They drank in silence. The courtyard remained quiet, but within that quiet, a shift had begun. The scholar felt the familiar impulse to ask questions, to define conclusions, to secure certainty. Instead, he let the impulse pass. He tasted the tea without analyzing its flavor. He felt the cool air without categorizing the sensation. For the first time in many years, he was not trying to manage the moment. He was simply inside it. The lesson had not been delivered through argument. It had been shown through a gesture. The overflowing cup revealed what effort alone could not. As you listen now, you may notice how often your own mind tries to organize experience into something predictable. It may attempt to control how quickly sleep should arrive. It may evaluate whether you are relaxing correctly. It may even judge the pace of this story. Gently observe that impulse. Control is subtle. It whispers that peace must be engineered, that rest must be achieved through precision. But sometimes the very effort to rest keeps the mind alert. The scholar came seeking answers. What he received instead was space. And in that space, something new became possible. The scholar remained at the monastery long after the tea had grown cool. Nothing dramatic had occurred. There had been no grand revelation, no secret mantra whispered into his ear. And yet, something fundamental had shifted. The need to grasp, to define, to control every layer of understanding had loosened, even if only slightly. He began to notice how deeply this impulse had shaped his life. From childhood, he had been praised for answers, for certainty, for intellectual command. Uncertainty felt dangerous. Not knowing felt like weakness. So he learned to compensate by thinking harder, studying longer, organizing more carefully. Control became a shield against discomfort. But sitting in the courtyard that day, he saw clearly that the shield was heavy. The Zen master's lesson was not a rejection of thought, nor a dismissal of discipline. It was an invitation to balance. When the mind becomes too full of opinions, of expectations, of rigid conclusions, it loses flexibility. It resists surprise, it resists correction, it resists the natural flow of experience. Control in its extreme form is a refusal to trust life. We see this pattern everywhere. We try to control how others perceive us. We adjust our words carefully, hoping to shape impressions. We try to control outcomes at work, rehearsing every possible scenario. We try to control relationships, steering conversations, anticipating responses. We even attempt to control our emotions, scolding ourselves for feeling anxious, sad, or uncertain. Yet, life unfolds beyond our plans. The weather changes without consultation. Other people carry inner worlds we cannot fully access. Circumstances shift without warning. And when reality refuses to obey our designs, frustration arises. We feel betrayed by unpredictability. The scholar realized that his restlessness had not come from a lack of knowledge, but from an excess of interference. He was constantly interfering with the present moment, shaping it, judging it, adjusting it, rarely allowing it to simply be. Letting go of control does not mean becoming passive or careless. It means discerning where effort is useful and where it becomes strain. It means acting where action is possible and releasing what lies beyond our reach. Consider the breath. You can influence it slightly, slow it, deepen it, but you do not create it from nothing. It moves on its own. If you try to dominate it completely, tension builds. If you ignore it entirely, it continues regardless. The healthiest rhythm comes from cooperation rather than domination. The same is true of thought. When we attempt to suppress every unwanted idea, the mind rebels. When we attempt to script every possible outcome, anxiety multiplies. But when we observe thoughts as passing phenomena, like clouds crossing a wide sky, they lose some of their urgency. The scholar began practicing this subtle shift. When a question arose, he allowed it to exist without racing to answer it immediately. When doubt appeared, he did not rush to eliminate it. He watched it, curious but not entangled. In that watching, space widened. The courtyard became a metaphor for his inner world. Leaves drifted where they would. Shadows lengthened and receded. Nothing strained to remain fixed. The master did not chase the wind. He did not instruct the sun when to set. He participated in the day without attempting to dominate it. Over time, the scholar understood something simple yet transformative. Peace does not emerge from perfect control. It emerges from wise relationship. We cannot control the length of our lives, but we can influence the quality of our attention. We cannot guarantee that others will understand us, but we can choose clarity in our own speech. We cannot prevent every mistake, but we can meet mistakes with patience rather than self-attack. When lying awake at night, the impulse to control often intensifies. The mind replays conversations, redesigns tomorrow's schedule, searches for certainty in a future that has not yet arrived. We tell ourselves that if we can just solve everything, now rest will follow. Yet rest does not respond to force. It arrives when resistance softens. As you listen, you may experiment gently with this idea. Notice any desire to manage the experience. Notice if part of you is trying to evaluate whether this story is helping enough, quickly enough. That evaluating voice is another form of control. Instead of arguing with it, simply acknowledge it. Let it be another thought passing through. You do not need to pour more tea into a cup that is already full. There is dignity in effort, but there is also wisdom in release. The scholar eventually left the monastery, not with a new theory, but with a quieter mind. His life did not become perfectly orderly. Challenges still arose, questions still appeared, but he approached them differently. Rather than gripping tightly, He allowed space for uncertainty, and in that space, something remarkable, unfolded. Tension decreased. He discovered that the world did not collapse when he loosened his grasp. Conversations flowed more naturally. Mistakes felt less catastrophic. Even difficult emotions passed more quickly when he stopped trying to reshape them. Letting go of control is not a dramatic act. It is often invisible. It is the small choice to pause before correcting someone unnecessarily. It is the decision to trust a process instead of micromanaging it. It is the willingness to admit I do not know without panic. When the cup is empty enough, new understanding can enter. As the memory of the courtyard fades, the image of the overflowing tea remains a quiet reminder that sometimes the most powerful change comes not from adding more, but from allowing space. From this lesson in release, we move now toward another encounter, one that explores how perception itself shapes the world we believe we see. From the quiet lesson of release, we turn toward another encounter, one that reveals how perception itself can limit what we are able to receive. There once was a professor who had devoted his life to the study of philosophy and religion. His shelves were lined with books from many traditions. He could quote ancient texts with precision and debate complex ideas with impressive confidence. Students admired his intellect. Colleagues respected his knowledge. Yet beneath his polished understanding, a subtle dissatisfaction lingered. He had read about enlightenment, about awakening, about a peace beyond ordinary comprehension, but these remained concepts rather than lived experience. He understood the words, yet he did not feel transformed by them. Hearing of a Zen master renowned for his clarity, the professor arranged a visit. He arrived with notebooks, prepared questions carefully composed, and a mind sharpened by years of disciplined inquiry. The Zen master welcomed him into a simple room, overlooking a quiet garden. There were no shelves of books, no stacks of manuscripts, no visible signs of scholarship. Only a low table, 2 cushions, and a teapot resting between them. The professor bowed politely and began to speak at once. He described his studies, his interpretations, his theories about consciousness and the nature of reality. He referenced ancient sutras and modern analysis alike. He spoke with enthusiasm and precision, weaving together insights from many schools of thought. The master listened without interruption. When the professor paused to draw breath, the master reached for the teapot. "Please," he said softly, "allow me to serve you tea." The professor nodded, still eager to continue his line of reasoning. The master began pouring. Clear tea streamed into the professor's cup. The liquid rose steadily toward the rim. The professor continued explaining his understanding of non-duality and the illusion of self. The tea reached the brim, and then it continued to rise. It spilled over the edge, running across the table and dripping onto the floor. The professor stared, startled. "Stop!" he said quickly. "The cup is full. No more will fit." The master placed the teapot down and looked at him gently. "Like this cup," he replied. "You are full of your own opinions and conclusions. How can I show you Zen unless you first empty your cup?" The room fell silent. The professor felt heat rise in his face. At first, embarrassment flickered through him, then irritation. Had he not traveled far to seek wisdom? Had he not prepared carefully? Was his dedication now being dismissed as excess? But as he looked at the tea, spreading slowly across the wooden table, something else began to dawn. He realized that he had not come to learn, he had come to confirm. He wanted the master to validate what he already believed. He wanted refinement, not disruption. He wanted agreement, not transformation. His cup was indeed full not only of knowledge but of expectation. Expectation shapes perception in ways we rarely notice. When we approach a conversation already certain of what we will hear, we filter new information through old conclusions. When we enter a moment convinced we understand it, we stop seeing what is actually present. The professor had read countless interpretations of Zen. He had constructed a mental image of what enlightenment must mean. Without realizing it, he was comparing every word the master spoke against that internal template. There was little room left for something truly unfamiliar. To empty the cup is not to discard intelligence, it is to loosen certainty. The master refilled the cup this time, stopping before it overflowed. He handed it to the professor, who accepted it with both hands. They drank in silence. The tea was warm and uncomplicated. It did not require interpretation. It did not invite debate. It was simply what it was. For the first time since entering the room, the professor stopped explaining. He stopped comparing. He stopped constructing arguments in his mind. He tasted the tea. In that simple act, a space opened, a space not crowded by analysis. We often approach life in the same way the professor approached the master. We enter situations with assumptions firmly in place. We believe we already know what a person means before they finish speaking. We believe we understand a feeling before we fully allow it to unfold. Anxiety says, I know how this will end. Resentment says, I know why they did that. Pride says, I already understand. Each of these fills the cup. When the cup is full, experience has nowhere to land. The Zen master's gesture was not criticism, it was compassion. He did not argue with the professor's ideas. He showed him their limitation. In the quiet garden beyond the room, leaves moved gently in the breeze. None of them insisted on remaining fixed in place. They shifted as the wind shifted. They did not cling to a previous position. To empty the cup is to become like those leaves, flexible, receptive, unburdened by the need to be right. The professor felt his earlier defensiveness soften. The embarrassment dissolved into curiosity. What might he discover if he approached each moment without the weight of prior certainty? What if understanding were less about accumulation and more about availability? The tea cooled in his hands, and with it, his urgency. He realized that true learning does not always add something new. Sometimes it removes what obstructs. As you listen now, notice whether your own cup feels crowded. Notice any expectations about how you should feel at this point in the night. Notice any conclusions about whether sleep will come easily or not. Gently, without force, set those expectations aside. Let the cup rest empty enough to receive whatever this moment offers. The tea cooled in his hands, and with it his urgency. He realized that true learning does not always add something new. Sometimes it removes what obstructs. As you listen now, notice whether your own cup feels crowded. Notice any expectations about how you should feel at this point in the night. Notice any conclusions about whether sleep will come easily or not. Gently, without force, set those expectations aside. Let the cup rest empty enough to receive whatever this moment offers. And as that space opens, another understanding begins to emerge, one that reaches beyond a single cup of tea. and into the way we see the world itself. When the mind is full, perception becomes narrow. We do not see what is present. We see what confirms what we already believe. The professor had arrived at the monastery, certain that enlightenment would resemble his theories. In that certainty, he was blind to the simplicity before him. This blindness is rarely dramatic. It happens quietly. We assume we understand a person because we have known them for years. We assume we understand ourselves because we have lived inside our own thoughts for a lifetime. We assume we understand the future because we have constructed a plausible narrative. But assumption is not the same as seeing. To empty the cup is to allow perception to refresh itself. It is to approach a familiar room as if entering it for the first time. It is to hear a familiar voice without overlaying it with yesterday's irritation. It is to feel a familiar emotion without immediately labeling it as weakness or strength. The professor began to experiment with this openness. As the master spoke, he listened without preparing a response. When a question arose in his mind, he let it remain unanswered. Instead of trying to capture each insight in words, he allowed it to dissolve into experience. In that simple shift, the atmosphere of the room changed. Not because the master said something new, but because the professor's listening had deepened. There is a quiet humility in not knowing. It softens the edges of pride and fear alike. When we do not insist on certainty, we become more attentive. When we are more attentive, subtle details emerge: the tone beneath the words, the feeling beneath the thought, the stillness beneath the noise. Consider how often tension arises from rigid interpretation. A glance becomes judgment, a pause becomes rejection, a delay becomes disrespect. Yet when the mind is less crowded, alternative possibilities appear. The glance may simply be distraction. The pause may be thoughtfulness. The delay may be fatigue. An empty cup does not guarantee pleasant outcomes. It guarantees clarity. Clarity allows response rather than reaction. Response carries steadiness. Reaction carries heat. The professor noticed that as he released his need to prove or defend, his body relaxed. His shoulders lowered. His breathing slowed. The conversation unfolded without strain. He was not diminished by letting go of certainty. He was expanded. This expansion is available in small, ordinary moments. You may notice it even now. If a thought arises, "I should already be asleep," observe it without immediately believing it. If another thought follows, "Tomorrow will be difficult," let it pass without gripping it. Each ungrasped thought is like a drop of tea that does not spill. The mind becomes lighter, and when the mind is lighter, rest draws nearer. The lesson of the overflowing cup extends beyond learning. It reaches into every corner of perception. When we release the insistence that we already know, the world feels less hostile. When we stop forcing experience into fixed categories, it becomes more fluid. The professor left the monastery carrying no new doctrine, no secret formula. What he carried was subtler a willingness to meet life without immediately trying to master it. That willingness is a form of quiet strength. As the image of the garden fades and the room grows still, notice the space around your own thoughts. There is always a small gap between one thought and the next. In that gap, nothing is required of you. No argument must be made. No defense must be mounted. Just presence. When the cup is not overflowing, tea can be received. When the mind is not overflowing, life can be experienced. And from this gentle clearing of perception, we move onward, ready to explore how illusion itself can shape what we believe to be real. From the quiet clearing of perception, we now step into one of the most enduring images in Zen tradition, the ox. Long ago, in a small rural village, surrounded by fields and low rolling hills, there lived a young boy, tasked with tending his family's ox. The animal was strong, stubborn, and easily distracted. At dawn each morning, the boy would lead it out toward the open pasture, rope in hand, determined to guide it where it needed to go. But the ox rarely cooperated. It would pull toward patches of grass the boy had not chosen. It would stop abruptly, dig its hooves into the earth, and refuse to move. At times, it would lunge in the opposite direction altogether, dragging the boy through dirt and dust. The more tightly the boy pulled on the rope, the more fiercely the ox resisted. His arms ached, his patience thinned. Frustration burned within him as he struggled to impose his will on the powerful creature. He sometimes shouted in anger, sometimes dug his heels into the ground, sometimes tried to overpower the animal through sheer determination. Yet each effort seemed only to increase the distance between them. In many ways, the ox was not malicious. It simply followed its instincts, seeking comfort, avoiding discomfort, chasing whatever caught its attention. It did not consider schedules or obligations. It did not share the boy's sense of responsibility. It responded to hunger, to sound, to movement. It lived according to impulse. Over time, the boy began to notice something subtle. Whenever he approached the ox with anger, the animal became more unruly. Whenever he yanked sharply at the rope, it pulled back with equal force. The struggle intensified because both were locked in opposition, each reacting to the other's tension. One afternoon, exhausted from yet another fruitless effort, the boy loosened his grip. He did not drop the rope entirely. He simply softened his hold. The ox, surprised by the absence of force, slowed. It lifted its head. The tension between them shifted. The boy took a cautious step forward, guiding gently rather than commanding. When the ox veered toward the grass, he redirected it with steady persistence instead of sudden aggression. When it resisted, he waited rather than escalating. He learned to feel the rope rather than fight it, to sense the animal's movement before it became a surge. Progress was slow. There were still moments when the ox bolted unexpectedly, chasing a scent or wandering toward distant sounds. But the boy no longer interpreted every deviation as defiance. He began to understand the animal's nature. He recognized patterns. He anticipated distractions. Instead of reacting in surprise, each time he responded with patience. The ox was strong. The ox was impulsive. The ox was easily distracted. But the ox was also trainable. This image has been used for centuries in Zen as a metaphor for the human mind. The ox represents our thoughts, impulses, desires, and fears. Like the animal in the field, the mind often wanders where it pleases. It rushes toward pleasure. It recoils from discomfort. It follows the loudest stimulus in the moment. When we first begin to observe our own minds, we may feel like the boy, dragged through dust by a force that seems larger than us. We sit quietly for a moment, intending to rest, and within seconds the mind leaps toward unfinished tasks, unresolved conversations, imagined futures. It runs toward memory. It runs toward anticipation. It runs toward anything that promises stimulation. The more we try to suppress these movements by force, the more forcefully they return. Stop thinking, we command. But the mind does not respond kindly to harsh orders. It pulls harder. The boy's early struggle mirrors this experience. He believed control meant domination. He believed guidance required tension, yet domination only strengthened resistance. The rope became a symbol of conflict rather than connection. Gradually, through repeated effort, he discovered another way. He learned the terrain of the field. He recognized which areas tempted the ox most strongly. He anticipated its habits. Instead of reacting with surprise each time it strayed, he adjusted with patience. He understood that force created more force, while steadiness created trust. In the same way, self-awareness grows through observation rather than aggression. When you notice your mind wandering, you need not scold it. You need not label yourself undisciplined. You simply notice and gently return. Return to the breath. Return to the sensation of lying here. Return to the quiet rhythm of listening. Each return is like guiding the ox back toward the path, not with anger, but with consistency. The boy's hands grew stronger over time, not from pulling harder, but from holding steadily. His patience deepened. His understanding matured. The ox began to sense the reliability of the one who guided it. The rope, once tight with conflict, gradually loosened into cooperation. Eventually, the ox responded more readily. It still possessed strength, still carried instinct, but it recognized the steady presence of its guide. Trust developed between them. The rope that once symbolized struggle became a quiet link. In your own life, you may recognize moments when your mind feels untamed. Perhaps at night when the body longs for rest, thoughts begin to race. Perhaps during the day when you intend to focus, distractions multiply. Perhaps in conversation when emotion surges before understanding arrives. This is not failure. It is simply the nature of the ox. The path of Zen does not ask you to eliminate the animal. It asks you to understand it. It asks you to develop patience with its impulses and steadiness in your guidance. To tame the ox is not to break it, but to walk beside it without being dragged. As this image settles in your mind, notice your own inner movements. If a thought appears, observe it without tightening. If an emotion rises, acknowledge it without immediately reacting. If distraction pulls at you gently, guide yourself back. The rope is still in your hands, but your grip can be calm. In time, the struggle softens into cooperation, and the field once chaotic begins to feel open and spacious. As days turned into weeks and weeks into months, the boy's relationship with the ox continued to change. At first, every morning had felt like a contest of strength. Dust rose, voices grew sharp. The rope tightened and burned against his palms. But now something quieter was forming between them. The boy no longer approached the pasture with dread. He approached with attentiveness. He began to notice the subtle signals that came before the ox pulled away, the slight lift of its head, the shift of weight in its shoulders, the pause before its hooves turned toward distraction. By paying attention early, he needed less force later. The struggle diminished, not because the ox lost its nature, but because the boy understood it more clearly. This is the deeper stage of taming the mind. In the beginning, we discover how restless our thoughts can be. We are surprised by their speed, their intensity, their persistence. We try to quiet them through effort, only to find that effort alone creates more agitation. Over time, if we remain patient, something subtle changes. We become familiar with our patterns. We learn which thoughts tend to arise at night, We learn which memories trigger emotion. We learn which fears repeat themselves under different disguises. Awareness grows not through suppression but through steady observation. The boy no longer felt personally offended when the ox veered off course. He did not interpret its movement as rebellion. He understood it as habit. In the same way, when an anxious thought appears, you need not treat it as failure. When distraction surfaces, you need not see it as weakness. It may simply be a well-worn path in the mind, one that has been traveled many times before. Habits lose power when they are seen clearly. Gradually, the rope that once felt like a symbol of conflict became a simple line of communication. The boy did not need to pull sharply. A gentle adjustment was often enough. The ox, sensing consistency, responded more readily. It still wandered occasionally, but the distance shortened. The returns became quicker. There were mornings when the field felt almost peaceful. The ox grazed calmly. The boy walked beside it without strain. The rope hung loosely between them, no longer taut with opposition. This stage is not perfection. The mind does not become permanently still. Thoughts still arise, emotions still move, but the relationship to them changes. Instead of being dragged, we walk alongside. You may notice this in your own experience. A thought arises about tomorrow's responsibilities. Instead of being swept away for minutes, perhaps, you observe it and gently return. An old memory appears. Instead of spiraling into self-criticism, perhaps you acknowledge it and let it pass. Each gentle return strengthens steadiness. The boy discovered that patience created trust. The ox learned that it was not being forced into submission. It was being guided with consistency. In time, resistance softened into cooperation. Zen does not promise that the ox will disappear. It promises that it can be understood. And understanding brings freedom. Freedom does not mean the absence of thought, it means the absence of entanglement. Thoughts may move through the field of awareness just as the ox moves through the pasture, but they no longer determine every direction. The boy began to enjoy the mornings. He noticed the dew on the grass. He felt the warmth of sunlight as it crept over the hills. His attention was no longer consumed entirely by struggle. Space had opened. When the ox strayed, he guided it back. When it resisted, he waited. When it cooperated, he relaxed. This rhythm became natural. In your own inner landscape, you can adopt the same rhythm. When the mind wanders, guide it back. When it resists, soften rather than tighten. When calm appears, rest in it without clinging. Over time, the dramatic tension between boy and ox faded. The rope grew lighter in his hand. There were moments when it felt almost unnecessary, when the ox walked beside him without pressure. This is the beginning of harmony. Not domination, not suppression, harmony, and from harmony, another transformation quietly begins. As the image of the field lingers in your mind, notice how the struggle that once seemed unavoidable has softened. The ox is still there, strong and alive, but the relationship has changed. In the next stage of this journey, we will see what happens when guidance becomes so natural that the rope is no longer needed at all. As harmony deepens between the boy and the ox, a quiet transformation unfolds. There comes a morning when the rope is no longer pulled tight. The boy steps into the field not with tension but with ease. The ox, once restless and defiant, grazes calmly at his side. The air feels different, not because the world has changed, but because the struggle has softened. On this particular day, something subtle happens. Instead of walking ahead and tugging the rope, The boy climbs gently onto the ox's broad back. The animal shifts slightly beneath his weight, then steadies. There is no resistance, no sudden lunge, no battle of wills. Together they begin to move. The ox walks slowly through the field, and the boy rides without gripping tightly. His hands rest lightly. His posture is relaxed. The rope hangs loosely, almost symbolic now rather than necessary. This image represents a profound stage in inner practice. The mind, once unruly, no longer requires constant correction. Thoughts still arise, but they do not dominate. Emotions still move, but they do not overwhelm. The energy that was once spent in conflict becomes available for awareness. Riding the ox home is not about victory, it is about integration. The boy no longer sees the ox as an adversary. He understands its strength, its habits, its impulses, and because he understands it, he can rest upon it. In your own experience, you may recognize moments like this. Perhaps there was a time when anxiety controlled your nights. Thoughts raced without pause. But gradually, through patient observation, you learned their rhythm. You noticed patterns. You stopped reacting so quickly. What once felt chaotic became familiar. The mind did not disappear. It became workable. As the ox carries the boy across the open pasture, birds move overhead in slow arcs. The morning sun rises, touching the grass with light. There is spaciousness now. No dust kicked up by struggle. No sharp commands echoing across the field. When the ox pauses to graze, the boy does not panic. When it resumes walking, he does not rush. There is trust in the rhythm. Trust is the quiet fruit of patience. At earlier stages, the rope symbolized discipline. Now it symbolizes connection. It reminds the boy that guidance remains possible, but it is no longer defined by force. The path home appears in the distance, a narrow trail leading back toward the village. The boy does not drive the ox urgently forward. He allows the journey to unfold at a natural pace. Riding the ox home suggests a return. Not a return to ignorance, but a return to simplicity. The mind that once required intense supervision now cooperates. Attention settles more easily. Presence feels less strained. Even when distraction arises, it passes quickly, like a small ripple on calm water. There is music in this stage of practice, an inner quiet that does not depend on external silence. The boy hums softly as they move along the path. The ox's steady steps form a gentle rhythm beneath him. In Zen illustrations, this stage is often depicted with the boy playing a flute while riding the ox. The flute represents effortless awareness. Sound arises without calculation. Breath flows without tension. The music is not forced, it is expressed. Likewise, when the mind is no longer in constant battle with itself, creativity and warmth emerge naturally. Conversation becomes easier. Laughter comes more freely. The world feels less like a threat and more like a field to move through calmly. You may notice this shift in small ways. A thought arises, and instead of pulling you away for long minutes, it fades. A strong emotion appears, and instead of escalating into reaction, it softens under gentle observation. The ox walks steadily beneath you. Yet even here, humility remains important. The boy does not abandon awareness completely. He remains attentive to the ox's movements. He feels its breathing. He notices subtle shifts. Harmony does not mean neglect. It means relationship. The trail narrows as they approach the village. Familiar trees line the path. Smoke rises from distant chimneys. The journey that once felt like endless struggle now feels like quiet companionship. Riding the ox home is the beginning of ease, not the end of practice, but a deepening of it. As you listen, imagine yourself riding gently through your own field of thoughts. There is no need to wrestle each idea to the ground. There is no need to silence every sound. You rest upon awareness itself, carried by steady presence. The rope hangs loose. The steps are even. The path leads naturally forward. As the village draws nearer, the image of the boy riding the ox becomes quieter, almost transparent. The rope still rests in his hand, yet it no longer defines the relationship. What once required effort now unfolds naturally. This stage of the journey is subtle. It does not announce itself with triumph. There is no dramatic victory, no proclamation that the mind has been conquered. Instead, there is a gentle familiarity. Thoughts arise and pass without leaving deep marks. Emotions move through without overwhelming the heart. Attention rests more easily in the present. Integration means that the division between guide and guided begins to soften. Earlier, the boy and the ox stood opposed, one pulling, the other resisting. Then they learned cooperation. Now they move as one rhythm. The boy does not need to anticipate every distraction because he trusts the steadiness that has developed. The ox does not test the rope because it senses calm rather than force. In your own experience, this may appear as a quiet steadiness beneath daily activity. You wake in the morning and the mind does not immediately scatter. You encounter a challenge, and although emotion arises, it does not carry you far. You notice irritation beginning, but it dissolves more quickly than before. This is not suppression, it is maturity. When the mind is no longer treated as an enemy, it becomes an ally. The same energy that once fueled anxiety can support clarity. The same sensitivity that once triggered overreaction can deepen empathy. The ox's strength, once chaotic, becomes supportive. There is a difference between controlling the mind and living in harmony with it. Control demands constant vigilance. Harmony allows rest. Control tightens the body. Harmony softens it. As the boy rides along the narrow trail, he does not grip tightly. His hands remain open. He feels the warmth of the ox beneath him, the slow rhythm of its breathing. The village sounds begin to reach them, faintly distant voices, the clatter of tools, the ordinary music of life. The journey that once felt like an endless struggle through open fields now feels like a return home. Home in Zen is not a physical location. It is a state of settled awareness. It is the recognition that there is nothing to chase and nothing to escape in this moment. The mind, once scattered across past and future, rests here. You may notice how this resting feels in your own body. Perhaps your shoulders have softened. Perhaps your breath has deepened without effort. Perhaps there is a subtle sense of spaciousness behind your thoughts. When thoughts arise now, they resemble clouds crossing a wide sky. They are visible, yet they do not obscure the vastness behind them. The ox continues walking. The sky remains open. Integration also brings humility. The boy understands that the ox still possesses strength. He does not become careless. He remains aware, but awareness is no longer tense. It is relaxed and alert at once. This balance is delicate and alive. In daily life, it may show itself in small gestures. You listen more fully before responding. You pause before reacting. You allow silence to exist without filling it immediately. The need to prove, to defend, to dominate softens. The rope, once essential, now hangs almost unnoticed. Eventually, as they reach the edge of the village, the boy slides down from the ox's back. He walks beside it without holding the rope at all. The ox follows naturally. There is no command, no correction. Movement flows without effort. This is the beginning of release. Not the disappearance of the mind, but the fading of struggle. In this stage, practice becomes less about doing and more about being. You no longer sit to fight your thoughts, you sit to accompany them. You no longer breathe to control your state. You breathe because breathing is happening. Riding the ox home teaches that the path of awareness does not lead away from life. It leads directly into it, but with ease. The village awaits, not as a place of distraction, but as a field where clarity can move freely. As you rest here, imagine setting down the rope entirely. Notice what remains. The ox is still present, the body is still breathing, the world is still turning. Yet there is no tension in the hand, only quiet companionship. From this companionship, a new insight begins to unfold, one in which even the image of the ox itself starts to dissolve. There comes a moment in the journey when the ox is no longer something to manage, no longer something to ride, no longer something to bring home. At first, the boy searched desperately for it. Then he struggled to tame it. Later, he rode it with ease. But now, standing at the quiet edge between effort and effortlessness, he notices something subtle. The ox is still present, and yet, it is not separate. The rope hangs loosely, but even the rope feels unnecessary. The idea that there is something wild to control has grown faint. The distinction between guide and guided, rider and ridden has begun to dissolve. In earlier stages, the story was clear. There was a boy, there was an ox, there was a field, there was struggle, then harmony. But as harmony deepens, the outlines soften. The boy no longer thinks, "I am guiding." There is simply walking. He no longer thinks the ox is obeying. There is simply movement. Breath moves through the body. Hooves press into the earth. Wind passes across skin. None of it feels divided. This is the beginning of transcendence, not disappearance, not destruction, but the fading of separation. The ox transcended does not mean the animal vanishes in smoke or light. It means the need to hold it as something separate collapses. What once felt like an inner opponent now feels like part of the same unfolding. In meditation, this stage appears quietly. At first, there is a meditator observing thoughts. There is an effort to watch, to remain present, to guide attention back when it wanders. There is a subtle sense of, "I am practicing." But one day, perhaps without warning, the distance between observer and observed narrows. Thought arises, and it is known, but there is no separate watcher standing behind it. Sound appears, and it is heard, but there is no listener located in the center of the head. The breath rises and falls, but there is no manager directing it. Experience continues, but the sense of a controller fades. The boy pauses. He looks at the ox, and for a moment he cannot tell where he ends and it begins. The strength of the ox was never outside him. The impulses he once feared were never foreign invaders. The restlessness of mind, the surge of emotion, the wandering of attention, all of it belonged to the same life moving through him. When resistance dissolved, unity revealed itself. The ox was not conquered, it was understood, and in being understood, it was included. There is a softness here that cannot be forced. If the mind tries to claim it, "I have transcended separation," quietly returns. So nothing is claimed. Walking continues, breathing continues. The world moves as it always has. But something fundamental has shifted. The boy no longer feels like a small self managing a large creature. He feels like life, moving as life. And in this subtle shift, the image of the ox begins to lose its necessity. As the image of the ox grows transparent, something unexpected begins to surface. If there is no longer an ox to tame, who remains as the tamer? At earlier stages, even in harmony, there was still a subtle center. The boy could say, "I have trained the ox." Even in peace, there lingered a quiet sense of ownership. I have grown. I have matured. I have progressed along the path. But as the boundary between rider and ridden dissolves, this center begins to feel uncertain. Who is this I that claims the journey? When attention turns inward to look for the one who guides it, finds sensations, memories, thoughts, fragments of identity. It finds images of the past and projections of the future. It finds emotional tones and bodily tensions. But it does not find a fixed controller. The one who thought he was guiding the ox is revealed to be another movement within the same field. This discovery is not dramatic. There is no explosion of insight. It is more like noticing that what you believe to be solid is made of mist. The boy stands quietly, and the sense of being a separate doer thins. There is seeing, but no seer standing apart. There is hearing, but no listener positioned behind the ears. There is thinking, but no thinker seated at the center. Life unfolds without a central manager. At first, this can feel unsettling. The mind, accustomed to anchoring itself in identity, searches for ground. If there is no separate self in control, how does anything function? Who makes decisions? Who takes responsibility? Yet the body continues to breathe, feet continue to move, words form and are spoken, choices arise without consulting a permanent authority. Even before this realization, life was already functioning without a solid controller. The idea of self was layered on top, claiming ownership after the fact. When this is seen clearly, tension loosens. Much of the struggle, in earlier stages, came from trying to protect an image, the image of being capable, disciplined, successful in practice. Now that image fades. There is no one left to defend, no identity left to polish, no achievement to secure. The ox, transcended, means that even the subtle pride of mastery dissolves. There is no longer a rider separate from what is ridden. There is only motion. Wind passes through trees, breath moves in the chest, thought flickers and fades, and all of it occurs within the same indivisible openness. The boy no longer feels like a small figure, standing against the vastness of the world. He feels like the vastness itself expressing as a figure. The circle begins to empty, not because something has been removed, but because separation has thinned to transparency. When the circle begins to empty, it does not feel like loss. Nothing has been taken away. The body is still here. The senses still function. Memory still operates, language still forms. Yet the invisible thread that once tied all experience to a central me grows faint. The boy remembers how fiercely he once clung to the idea of self. The one who searched, the one who failed, the one who succeeded, the one who improved, the one who disciplined the mind. That figure once felt solid, necessary, and urgent. Now it feels like a story, useful perhaps, but not fundamental. He watches thoughts arise that still use the word I. I am walking, I am breathing, I understand, I do not understand, yet these words float lightly. They no longer point to a fixed entity. They are sounds, mental movements, convenient references. The deep shift here is subtle. Experience is no longer organized around a center. In earlier stages, awareness seemed to radiate outward from a point. Now, there is no point. There is simply a field. In this field, sensations appear. In this field, sound vibrates. In this field, images and memories pass. But none of it belongs to a separate owner. This can feel spacious, even liberating. It can also feel vulnerable. Without a solid identity to retreat into, life feels immediate and exposed. There is no mask to hide behind, no rigid role to defend, but there is also nothing to protect. The boy notices that when anger flickers, it does not solidify into my anger. It rises as heat, as movement, and then dissolves. When sadness touches the heart, it does not become a permanent identity. It is felt fully and then it softens. Without a center to reinforce them, emotions lose their stickiness. Even the desire to hold on to clarity begins to dissolve. There is no longer an ambition to remain awakened, no pressure to sustain a special state. The field of awareness is not something that must be maintained. It is what remains when maintenance stops. The ox has been transcended, not because it disappeared, but because the distinction that required the image of an ox has dissolved. What once appeared as a problem to solve is seen as part of the same whole. There is simplicity here that resists description. Walking happens, breathing happens, living happens, and no one stands apart to supervise it. The circle empties further, the figure fades, only openness remains. As the circle empties, there is no dramatic ending to announce. The boy does not disappear in a flash of light. The landscape does not dissolve into abstraction. The village remains where it has always been. The wind still moves through trees. Dust still gathers on the road. And yet the story of separation has quietly concluded. What began as a search for something missing has dissolved into the recognition that nothing was ever outside the whole. The ox was never truly other. The self was never fixed. The struggle was born from misunderstanding, and understanding has softened it. Now, when the boy stands beneath the open sky, there is no sense of standing against it. Sky and body are not opposed. Sound and hearing are not divided. Movement and awareness are not two. The simplicity of this cannot be overstated. It is not mystical. It is not abstract. It is the direct experience of life without inserting a separate owner into the center of it. There is seeing, but no seer, apart from what is seen. There is breathing, but no breather apart from breath. There is living, but no isolated entity apart from life. At this stage, even the language of transcendence begins to feel unnecessary. Nothing has been elevated above the world. Nothing has been removed from it. The boy is not superior to those who have never searched for an ox. He is not special. He is simply free from a misunderstanding. The empty circle is not a void to cling to. It is not a state to preserve. It is an openness in which everything is allowed. From this openness, a new movement prepares to unfold, for when both ox and the one who chased it are seen as transparent, what remains is not emptiness alone. There is clarity, there is presence, there is an origin deeper than identity. The journey does not end in disappearance. It turns toward the source itself. And from this turning, the next unfolding begins, where even the memory of ox and self fades into something more fundamental than form. When even the image of the ox has grown transparent and the sense of a separate self has thinned to a whisper, another shift begins. At first there was the search, then there was the struggle, then there was harmony. Then even a harmony dissolved into openness. Now something quieter unfolds, the forgetting of both ox and self. This forgetting is not an act of will. It is not an effort to erase memory or deny individuality. It is the natural fading of structures that are no longer needed. Earlier, the ox symbolized the restless mind impulses, desires, fears, wandering thoughts. The boy symbolized discipline, awareness, guidance. Even when separation dissolved, these symbols still lingered as subtle reference points. But in this stage, even the reference points loosen. There is no longer a need to speak of mind and awareness as two. No need to speak of seeker and sought. No need to speak of progress. The field is simply open. If you were to look now for the ox, you would not find it as a distinct force. Thoughts still arise. Emotions still move. Sensations still ripple through the body. Yet none of them stand apart as something to be controlled. If you were to look for the one who practices, you would not find a solid center either. You might notice a sensation behind the eyes, a feeling in the chest, a memory of who you believe yourself to be. But each of these dissolves under gentle observation. What remains cannot be pointed to. It is not an object. It is not an identity. It is not even a state. It is the simple fact that experience is happening. In traditional Zen imagery, this stage is often represented as a blank circle. No figures, no landscape, no narrative. The circle is complete yet empty of distinction. This emptiness is easily misunderstood. It is not the emptiness of absence. It is the emptiness of separation. Within it, everything is included. Sound appears, breath rises, thought flickers, light shifts across closed eyelids. None of it belongs to anyone. This can feel almost invisible because it is so immediate. There is no fireworks display announcing the forgetting. There is no sense of I have arrived. In fact, the one who might claim arrival has already grown transparent. When both ox and self are forgotten, experience flows without circling back to a central narrator. The mind may still use the word I, but it functions like a convenience, not a declaration of ownership. Language continues. Action continues. Life continues. But the weight of self-reference has lightened. You may recognize glimpses of this in your own life. Moments when you were so absorbed in what you were doing that there was no self-consciousness. Moments when laughter erupted and there was no performer behind it. Moments when sorrow moved through you and for a brief instant there was no resistance, only tenderness. These glimpses are not special experiences to collect. They are windows into how life already functions without a solid center. In forgetting both ox and self, there is no longer an inner opponent and no inner controller. There is simply unfolding. The circle rests, unmarked, whole. As the blank circle rests without image, the mind may attempt to understand what has happened. If there is no ox and no self, what remains? At first, this question seems philosophical, but when examined directly, it becomes immediate and intimate. Right now, there is experience. There is sound, perhaps faint and distant. There is sensation in the body. There is the subtle rhythm of breath. There may be thought agreeing, doubting, interpreting. All of it appears, but none of it gathers around a solid center. Previously, experience seemed organized around a point, a small interior location from which perception radiated. There was a sense of me in here encountering a world out there. Thoughts were internal. Sounds were external. The body marked a boundary between the two. Now that boundary softens, sound does not travel from outside to inside, it simply appears in awareness. Sensation does not belong to a separate self. It arises in the same field as sound. Thought does not originate from a fixed thinker, it flickers within the same openness. This is the beginning of recognizing non-duality, not a mystical merging of two things, but the recognition that there were never truly two. When both ox and self are forgotten, the division between subject and object weakens. Seeing is not separate from what is seen. Hearing is not separate from what is heard. The idea of an observer behind the eyes becomes difficult to locate. If you search for the observer, you may find sensations: pressure in the head, tension in the brow, a faint sense of being behind perception. But each of these sensations is itself observed. None of them are the observer. The search turns in circles and dissolves. There is awareness, but it has no edge. It does not begin at the skin and end at the horizon. The sky you imagine, the memory you recall, the sound in the room, all arise within the same seamless field. Without a center claiming ownership, experience becomes lighter. Pain may still arise. Joy may still arise. Confusion may still arise. But they do not attach to a permanent identity. They move like weather through open space. This openness is not cold or detached, it is intimate. Everything that appears is included. Nothing stands outside the circle. The forgetting of both ox and self does not remove personality or uniqueness. The body still has preferences. The mind still forms opinions. Habits may still surface, but these patterns are no longer mistaken for a solid, enduring self. They are movements, temporary, transparent. In this transparency, there is relief. The effort to defend an image softens. The urgency to secure a position eases. Life continues to unfold, but it no longer revolves around a central story. The circle remains empty of division, and within this emptiness, everything appears exactly as it is. As separation thins and the sense of a fixed center aids, an unexpected phase can arise. For a mind long accustomed to anchoring itself in identity, the loss of that anchor may feel uncertain at first. If there is no solid self, what prevents life from falling apart? If there is no central controller, what ensures order? These questions may not always appear as words. They may surface as subtle unease, a fleeting anxiety, a sensation of groundlessness, a sense that something familiar has disappeared. This is natural. For years, perhaps decades, experience has been organized around the idea of me. Decisions were filtered through personal history. Emotions were interpreted as belonging to an owner. Even spiritual practice was framed as something done by someone. When both ox and self are forgotten, the structure dissolves. Without the old center, perception feels wider, more immediate, less filtered. At first, this openness may feel vulnerable. Without a rigid identity, to retreat into emotions can appear raw. Without a strong narrative of self-reactions are not automatically justified or defended. But if you remain quietly present, something remarkable becomes clear. Life has never depended on a solid self to function. Before you form a thought about breathing, breath is already moving. Before you decide to hear, sound is already present. Before you claim ownership of a choice, the impulse has already arisen. The idea of a central controller was layered on top of processes that were already unfolding. Seeing this directly brings a new kind of stability, not the stability of rigid identity, but the stability of openness itself. Groundlessness reveals itself as ground. When there is no fixed center to defend, experience becomes less reactive. Anger may flare, but it is not reinforced by a story of personal attack. Fear may tremble through the body, but it is not amplified by the belief that identity is at risk. Emotions pass through, like wind through an open field. Nothing is trapped, nothing is held too tightly. In this way, what once felt like loss becomes freedom. The forgetting of both ox and self is not annihilation, it is transparency. The structures that once seemed solid are seen as patterns, and patterns can shift. The circle remains empty of division yet vibrant with life. It does not collapse, it does not disappear. It simply allows everything to arise and dissolve within it. As this becomes familiar, even the subtle fear of losing oneself relaxes. There is nothing to lose. There never was. Only movement within openness. Only life unfolding is life. As the circle remains empty of separation, something subtle begins to clarify. The forgetting of both ox and self is not the end of the journey. It is not a blank void in which nothing matters. It is a transparency so complete that nothing stands apart from the whole. Earlier, the path seemed to move from confusion to control, from control to harmony, from harmony to dissolution. Now dissolution itself settles into simplicity. There is no longer an image of practice. No longer a sense of progressing, no longer even a sense of transcending. There is simply this immediate, unfiltered, unowned. When sound arises, it does not belong to anyone. When sensation moves through the body, it is not claimed. When thought appears, it is not anchored to a thinker. Everything is allowed to be exactly as it is. In this allowance, the blank circle reveals a quiet fullness. It is empty of division, yet complete in itself. Nothing is missing, nothing needs to be added. The world is not rejected, nor is it grasped. The forgetting of both ox and self removes the last subtle boundary between inner and outer. The field of awareness is no longer organized around a center. It has no edge that can be found. There is no point from which life is observed. There is only life, flowing, unfolding, uncontained. This stage can feel almost too ordinary to recognize. There are no dramatic insights flashing across the mind. There is no sense of becoming extraordinary. Instead, the extraordinary dissolves into the simplicity of being. Mountains remain mountains, rivers remain rivers, but they are no longer experienced as distant objects observed by a separate self. They appear within the same seamless openness as thought and breath. The circle is empty yet vibrant, transparent yet alive, and from within this openness a deeper recognition begins to stir. For when both ox and self have faded from view, what remains is not absence, it is origin. It is the quiet source from which all experience arises. The journey now turns gently toward that source, not to grasp it, not to define it, but to recognize it as the ground that has always been present beneath every step. The blank circle rests, and within its stillness, the next unfolding prepares to emerge. When both ox and self have been forgotten, and the circle rests empty of division, a new recognition quietly begins. It does not feel like progress. It does not feel like attainment. It feels like remembering something that was never absent. Earlier in the journey, there was searching. The boy looked for the ox in distant fields. Later, he worked to discipline it. Then he learned to ride it home. Eventually, even the image of rider and ox dissolved. Now, standing in the openness that remains, he senses something more fundamental than the absence of separation. There is a ground beneath experience, not a physical ground, not a conceptual foundation, but the simple fact that experience is known. Before any thought arises, there is awareness. Before any emotion forms, there is presence. Before any identity is remembered, there is knowing. This knowing cannot be seen as an object. If you try to look at it directly, you will only find thoughts, sensations, or images. Yet without it, nothing could appear. Reaching the source does not mean traveling backward in time to the beginning of the universe. It means recognizing the origin of experience in this very moment. Sound arises within awareness. Sensation arises within awareness. Thought arises within awareness and dissolves back into it. Earlier awareness may have seemed like something you possessed, something located behind the eyes or inside the head. But when examined carefully, it has no clear boundary. Where does awareness end? Does it stop at the skin? Does it end at the horizon? Or is the horizon itself an appearance within it? When both ox and self have faded, awareness reveals itself as centerless. It does not originate from a point. It does not travel outward. It simply is. This recognition is gentle. It does not overwhelm. It feels almost ordinary. The source is not dramatic. It does not shine with spectacle. It is closer than any idea about it. In silence, it is present. In sound, it is present. In confusion, it is present. In clarity, it is present. Nothing disturbs it. Even the search for it occurs within it. The boy realizes that the entire journey, the searching, the taming, the writing, the dissolving, unfolded within this same source. It was never outside of him. It was never separate from the ox. It was never absent. Mountains appear within it. Rivers flow within it. Thoughts move within it. Breath rises and falls within it. Reaching the source is not gaining something new. It is recognizing what has always been here, silently supporting every step. The circle is no longer only empty. It is luminous with quiet presence. And from this quiet recognition, the journey deepens further. As the recognition of the source stabilizes, the mind may attempt to describe it. It may call it awareness. It may call it presence. It may call it suchness. But every word feels slightly inadequate. The source is not an object that can be held in thought. It is not a mystical substance hidden behind appearances. It is the simple, undeniable fact that whatever appears is known. Suchness refers to things as they are before they are divided into categories. Before a sound is labeled pleasant or unpleasant, it is simply vibration. Before a sensation is judged comfortable or uncomfortable, it is simply sensation. Before a thought is believed or rejected, it is simply movement within awareness. Reaching the source means resting in this directness. Nothing extra is added, nothing is removed. The natural mind does not need to fabricate stillness. It does not need to suppress activity. It recognizes that stillness and activity arise within the same field. When anger arises, it is known as heat and energy. When joy arises, it is known as brightness and expansion. When sadness appears, it is known as softness and weight. Each experience reveals itself fully when it is not filtered through identity. The groundless ground of awareness does not cling to one state over another. It does not prefer peace over turbulence. It does not grasp clarity or reject confusion. All of it appears and dissolves in the same openness. This openness is not fragile. It does not depend on ideal conditions. Even when the body is tired, awareness is present. Even when thoughts are chaotic, awareness is present. Even when emotions surge, awareness is present. The source is not disturbed by what flows through it. Earlier, the path involved effort, returning attention, guiding the ox, dissolving separation. Now, effort relaxes. There is no need to hold on to the source. It cannot be lost because it was never gained. If doubt appears, have I really reached it? That doubt is known within the same field. If certainty appears, yes, this is it, that too is known. The source does not take sides. It remains open. This recognition brings a quiet humility. There is no one who owns the source. There is no individual who can claim it as personal achievement. It is shared by all beings because it is the condition for any experience at all. Mountains arise within it. Voices arise within it. Memories arise within it. The entire world unfolds within this scentless clarity. Reaching the source is not the end of experience. It is the end of misunderstanding. What remains is simplicity, immediate, unfiltered, alive. And as this simplicity becomes familiar, something begins to move outward once more, preparing for expression within the world. As the source becomes less of an idea and more of a lived recognition, daily experience begins to reveal it in quiet, ordinary ways. It is not found only in silence. It is not limited to meditation. It does not require special conditions. It is present while washing dishes, while walking down a crowded street, while listening to someone speak. The sound of running water appears within awareness. The weight of a plate in the hand appears within awareness. The subtle emotion that arises during conversation appears within awareness. Nothing is outside the field. This is not a mystical perception, layered on top of reality. It is reality seen without dividing it into inner and outer. The source does not sit behind experience. It is the openness in which experience unfolds. Earlier, awareness might have seemed fragile, easily disturbed by noise, by conflict, by discomfort. Now it is recognized as stable, not because circumstances are calm, but because awareness itself is untouched by what passes through it. A difficult conversation may still quicken the heartbeat. Unexpected news may still cause shock. Physical pain may still register sharply. Yet beneath these movements, the simple fact of knowing remains unchanged. This stability does not create indifference. On the contrary, it allows deeper responsiveness. Because awareness is not contracted around self-protection, it can meet experience directly. If anger arises in another person, it is heard without immediately constructing a defense. If sadness appears in a friend, it is felt without needing to fix it instantly. The source expresses itself as attentive presence. Suchness becomes visible in the smallest details. The texture of air on skin, the rhythm of footsteps on pavement, the rise and fall of breath at night. Each of these is complete in itself. Nothing needs to be added to make the moment meaningful. In reaching the source, the search for a better experience falls away. There is no longer a constant scanning for improvement. Experience is allowed to be exactly as it is, dynamic, shifting, imperfect. This does not eliminate preference. The body may still prefer comfort over discomfort. The mind may still incline toward clarity rather than confusion. But preference is seen as movement, not as identity. When restlessness appears, it is known as restlessness. When peace appears, it is known as peace. Neither defines the ground. The source is like space, not because it is distant or abstract, but because it accommodates everything without strain. Clouds do not damage the sky. Storms do not tear space apart. Likewise, thoughts and emotions do not disturb awareness itself. This recognition gradually removes the urgency that once fueled the path. There is no longer a need to chase awakening. There is no longer fear of losing it. The source is not a state that comes and goes. States change, awareness remains, and in this steady recognition, life continues to unfold simple, immediate, and whole. As the recognition of the source deepens, something subtle becomes undeniable. Nothing stands outside of it. Not thought, not emotion, not the body, not the world. Earlier in the journey, there was always a sense of movement towards something, a goal, a refinement, a clearer state. Now movement itself is seen as arising within the same unbroken field. There is no distance between seeker and source because the source was never elsewhere. The mind may still attempt to conceptualize it. It may imagine the source as a luminous center or a vast background behind events. But even these images are appearances within awareness. The source is not hidden behind experience. It is the simple fact that experience is happening at all. This recognition is quiet. It does not need confirmation. It does not require agreement. It does not depend on maintaining a particular mood or atmosphere. When noise fills a room, awareness is present. When silence settles, awareness is present. When confusion arises, awareness is present. When clarity shines, awareness is present. There is no state that excludes it. The journey that began with searching for the ox has dissolved into this simplicity. The ox was never separate. The self who searched was never solid. The path unfolded within the very ground that was being sought. In reaching the source, the final layer of misunderstanding softens. There is no longer a belief that awakening belongs to an individual. There is no private possession of clarity. The source is shared by all beings because it is the condition for any experience to appear. Mountains arise within it. Rivers flow within it. Cities move within it. Voices speak within it. Everything participates in the same centerless openness. This does not remove individuality. Each form still expresses itself uniquely. Each voice carries its own tone. Each life unfolds in distinct circumstances. Yet beneath these differences, the same ground supports all. As this becomes clear, the sense of isolation loosens. The world is no longer experienced as something outside awareness. It is experienced as movement within it. And from this recognition, a gentle turning begins. For if the source has been recognized inwardly, life does not end there. The clarity that sees must now live. The openness that includes must now express. The journey does not conclude in stillness alone. It returns. Back into conversation. Back into relationship. Back into the marketplace of ordinary life. Reaching the source is not an escape from the world. It is the beginning of a wholehearted return to it. When the source has been recognized and the ground of awareness is no longer mistaken for something distant, the journey does not end in silence. It turns outward, not as a fall from realization, but as its natural expression. Earlier, the boy searched through fields and forests. Later, he learned to guide the ox. Then, even the ox and the one who guided it dissolved into openness. Now, standing in the clarity of the source, there is no impulse to remain apart from life. The gates of the village are still there. The road is still dusty. Voices still rise and fall in conversation. Nothing about the world has changed, yet everything is different. Return to the world does not mean abandoning insight, it means embodying it. The one who has seen the source does not withdraw into abstraction. He steps into ordinary life, into markets, homes, and gatherings. He feels the weight of the body, the pull of responsibility, the rhythm of daily tasks. He buys food. He greets neighbors. He listens when someone speaks. He answers when addressed. The simplicity of these gestures carries the depth of realization. Earlier life may have felt divided into sacred and mundane. Meditation was sacred. Silence was sacred. Insight was sacred. The noise of daily affairs felt like distraction. Now that division has dissolved. The marketplace is not outside awareness. It unfolds within it. The cry of a vendor, the clatter of footsteps, the murmur of conversation, each sound appears in the same open field that once seemed accessible, only in stillness. Return to the world reveals that there is no separate place where awakening resides. There is no hidden chamber where clarity must be preserved. The ground recognized in solitude is present in the midst of activity. When someone speaks in frustration, the words are heard fully. There is no reflex to defend a rigid identity. When disagreement arises, it is met without collapsing into self-protection. The openness of the source allows space for response rather than reaction. This does not mean passivity. It means responsiveness. Action continues, work continues, relationships continue. But they are no longer driven by the tight urgency of self-concern. In the return, compassion begins to move more visibly, not as an ideal to uphold, but as a natural resonance with shared being. The suffering of others is not experienced as foreign. It is felt within the same field that once seemed personal. Helping does not arise from superiority. It arises from connection. The boy who once chased the ox no longer stands apart from those who are still searching. He recognizes their struggle because he once believed in separation too. Yet he does not impose his understanding. He participates, he listens, he responds when appropriate. Return to the world completes the arc of the journey. What began as an attempt to control the mind has ended as an effortless participation in life. The clarity of the source is not held as a possession. It flows through ordinary acts. The dust on the road is not separate from awareness. The laughter of children is not separate from awareness. The weight of fatigue at the end of the day is not separate from awareness. All of it belongs. In this belonging, nothing needs to be rejected, and nothing needs to be elevated. The world exactly as it is becomes the living expression of the source that was once. As clarity moves through ordinary life, it does not announce itself as wisdom. It expresses itself quietly, in patience, in attention, in restraint. The return to the world is not dramatic. It is not the display of spiritual attainment. It is the integration of realization into gesture, tone, and presence. When conflict arises, the body may still react, the heart may beat faster, words may form quickly. Yet there is space around these movements. Instead of tightening around identity, there is room to breathe. A pause appears. Within that pause, choice becomes possible. Earlier in the journey, reaction was often immediate and personal. Anger felt like my anger. Fear felt like my fear. Now these energies are recognized as movements within awareness. They are felt fully, but they are not owned. Because they are not owned, they do not dictate action. This is embodied compassion. Not softness without strength, not passivity, but clarity expressing itself through balanced response. If someone speaks harshly, Listening does not collapse into defensiveness. If someone is grieving, presence does not rush to fix. If someone celebrates, joy is shared without envy. Compassion arises not from obligation, but from understanding that no one stands outside the same field of being. The one who has returned to the world no longer sees others as separate selves competing for space. Each person appears as a unique expression of the same ground. Their confusion and their hope, their struggle all unfold within the same awareness that has been recognized as the source. In this recognition, judgment softens, not because discernment disappears, but because hostility loses its foundation. Daily responsibilities continue. Bills must be paid, work must be completed, bodies must be cared for. The return does not remove these tasks. It transforms the way they are approached. Work becomes participation rather than self-definition. Effort becomes expression rather than burden. Success and failure lose their power to determine identity. When mistakes occur, they are acknowledged without collapse. When praise appears, it is received without inflation. The ground of awareness remains steady beneath shifting circumstances. There is also vulnerability in this return. Realization does not shield the body from illness or the heart from loss. Grief may arrive unexpectedly. Pain may settle in the bones. Uncertainty may cloud the future. Yet even here, something remains unshaken. Tears can fall without becoming a story of injustice. Fear can tremble without becoming a permanent identity. Joy can blossom without clinging. Embodied awakening is not an escape from the human condition. It is the willingness to inhabit it fully. The marketplace becomes the temple. Conversation becomes practice. Silence becomes available in the midst of sound. There is no need to separate spiritual life from ordinary life. Cooking, cleaning, speaking, resting, each act is an expression of the same clarity once discovered in solitude. The boy who once searched for the ox is no longer distinguishable from those around him. He does not carry visible signs of realization. He carries groceries, he carries tools, he carries responsibilities. Yet within him there is ease, not because life is simple, but because separation has dissolved. The return to the world completes the circle, not by ending the journey, but by revealing that there was never a true departure. The source and the marketplace are not two. Clarity and activity are not two. Self and other are not two. Life continues, ordinary, unfolding, whole. As realization settles into daily life, it encounters what every human life eventually encounters: loss, change, uncertainty. The return to the world does not protect the body from aging or the heart from breaking. It does not promise that relationships will remain intact or that plans will unfold as expected. In fact, it is precisely here in the midst of difficulty that embodied awakening reveals its depth. When illness appears, sensations of pain may move sharply through the body. Fatigue may settle in the limbs. Fear may whisper quietly about what might come next. None of this is denied. None of it is spiritualized away. It is felt, fully, directly. But it is not wrapped in the added layer of, why is this happening to me? The absence of a rigid self does not eliminate pain, but it removes the isolation around it. Pain becomes experience rather than identity. Grief, too, may arrive without warning. The loss of a loved one can open a vast ache in the chest. Memories surface, tears come easily. The return to the world does not suppress these movements. It allows them. Grief flows within awareness, just as joy once did. There is tenderness here, not resistance. Earlier in the journey, suffering may have felt like proof of personal failure or cosmic injustice. Now it is recognized as part of the human condition, waves rising and falling within the same open field. This recognition does not harden the heart, it softens it. Because there is no longer a need to defend identity, vulnerability becomes possible. The one who has returned to the world can admit fear without shame, can admit confusion without collapse, can admit not knowing without losing ground. The ground is no longer conceptual certainty, it is presence itself. In times of uncertainty, plans may dissolve, expectations may shift, the future may appear unclear. Yet awareness remains immediate and available. Even doubt is known. This knowing does not solve uncertainty, it holds it. And in being held without panic, uncertainty loses some of its edge. The return to the world also includes ordinary frustrations, delays, misunderstandings, small disappointments. The mind may still react, irritation may arise, but these reactions are seen as passing weather rather than permanent storms. They move through openness and fade. Because they are not reinforced by a story of self, they do not accumulate into bitterness. In this way, stability deepens not as rigidity but as flexibility. The ability to bend without breaking, to feel without drowning, to respond without being consumed. Embodied awakening is not perfection. It is resilience grounded in clarity. The one who has returned to the world continues to participate in life fully, laughing when laughter comes, mourning when mourning comes, working when work is required, resting when rest is possible. There is no need to escape the human condition. It is embraced. And within that embrace, something quiet and steady remains, not separate from life, but woven through it. The journey that began with searching now expresses itself as simple presence in whatever arises, not resisting, not clinging, not withdrawing, living fully. As the journey comes full circle, nothing outwardly extraordinary marks its completion. There is no final revelation descending from the sky, no permanent halo of light, no separation between before and after. What has changed is subtle yet irreversible. The boy who once searched through distant fields for the ox now walks quietly through the village. He is not burdened by the need to prove anything. He does not carry the image of a seeker or the identity of one who has arrived. The entire path, searching, taming, riding, dissolving, has become transparent. Life continues as it always has. Morning comes, evening falls. Seasons turn, bodies age, children grow. Nothing has been removed from the human story. Yet something fundamental is no longer misunderstood. There is no solid self at the center of experience. There is no separate world outside awareness. There is only this seamless unfolding. The return to the world is not a step backward from realization. It is realization fully lived. The marketplace, once noisy and distracting, is recognized as another expression of the same clarity discovered in silence. The cry of a vendor, the laughter of friends, the fatigue at the end of the day, each movement arises within the same open field. The circle that once seemed too empty is now complete. Empty of division, full of life. The ox was never separate. The self was never fixed. The source was never distant. The world was never outside it. Nothing needs to be added to make this moment whole. Nothing needs to be taken away. The journey ends where it began, in ordinary life. But it is no longer seen through the lens of separation. There is simplicity here. Ease, A quiet, unshakable openness. Walking continues, breathing continues, living continues, and in the midst of it all, clarity shines not as something special, but as the very heart of the ordinary. The circle closes, and nothing is left out. And now as this long journey gently settles, there is nothing more you need to understand, nothing more to achieve, nothing more to reach. The story of the boy and the ox has unfolded through searching, struggling, guiding, dissolving, remembering, and returning. But if you look closely, you may notice that the journey was never far from where you are right now. You have walked through fields of thought. You have tried to discipline the restless movements of the mind. You have learned to ride moments of clarity. You have seen separation soften. You have watched identity grow transparent. You have sensed the quiet source beneath experience. And finally, you have returned to the world not as someone special, but as life itself, lived more simply. There is nothing mystical about this ending. It is quiet, ordinary, complete. As you rest now, allow the story to dissolve, just as the ox dissolved, just as the self dissolved. Let the images fade, let the concepts soften. You do not need to hold on to any of it. The breath is here, rising, falling, without effort. The body is here, supported, resting, without demand. Sounds may still be present around you, a distant hum, the subtle movement of air, perhaps even the faint echo of these words. None of it needs to be pushed away. Everything is allowed, just as it is. The journey through the Ten Ox pictures was never about escaping life. It was about seeing life clearly, seeing that the struggle to control, to secure, to defend a separate self was built on misunderstanding. And when misunderstanding softens, what remains is openness. Gentle, unforced, unshakable. You do not need to transcend anything right now. You do not need to return anywhere. You are already here. Notice the simple fact of awareness. Before any thought arises, awareness is present. Before any memory appears, awareness is present. Even if the mind feels cloudy or tired, awareness is quietly knowing that cloudiness, that tiredness. There is no effort required. Awareness is not something you create. It is what allows experience to appear. Let yourself rest as that, not as an idea, not as a philosophy, but as simple knowing. If a thought arises about today, about tomorrow, about something unfinished, let it move through like a cloud drifting across the sky. You do not need to follow it. You do not need to resist it. It appears. It dissolves. Breath continues. If emotion stirs a faint sadness, a quiet gratitude, a subtle tension, allow it to be felt. Not as my emotion, simply as movement. Nothing needs to be fixed before you sleep. Nothing needs to be completed. The marketplace of the day can rest. The responsibilities can pause. Even the journey itself can fade into stillness. Imagine the boy walking home at dusk. The road is quiet. The air is cool. There is no ox to guide, no rope in hand, no achievement to claim, just footsteps and the soft rhythm of breath. That is enough. As you lie here, you are not separate from that quiet road. The same awareness that knew the story now knows the sensation of your body resting. The same openness that held mountains and rivers holds this moment. Nothing stands outside of it. Let your shoulders soften. Let your jaw release. Let the space behind your eyes relax. You are not required to hold the world together tonight. The world continues without your effort. Breath moves on its own. The heart beats without instruction. Sleep, Approaches naturally like night settling over the land. If you notice the mind trying to do something, to meditate, to hold awareness, to maintain clarity, allow even that impulse to soften. There is nothing to maintain, nothing to preserve. The source was never fragile. It does not disappear when you close your eyes. It does not weaken when you drift into dreams. Awareness does not demand attention. It simply is. And in sleep, it rests in its own way. The journey that began with searching ends not in triumph, but in simplicity. Life lived fully, without separation. As this day completes itself, let gratitude arise, gently, not forced, not exaggerated, simply a quiet acknowledgement that you have walked this path inwardly, through confusion, through insight, through dissolution, through return, and now through rest. If these words have offered you anything, let it be ease. If they have stirred reflection, let reflection soften into stillness. There is no need to carry teachings into dreams. Let them dissolve, like footprints in sand at the edge of water. As night deepens, allow your breathing to grow slower. Inhale softly, exhale longer. Feel the weight of your body supported. Feel the gentle pull of gravity holding you in place. Nothing needs to be solved tonight. Nothing needs to be perfected. The ox is at peace. The boy is at peace. The field is wide and quiet, and you too can rest in that quiet openness. If tonight, these reflections have brought even a small measure of calm, know that you may return to this space whenever you need. In the stillness of the long night, you are not asked to become anything other than what you already are. This space exists simply to remind you of the clarity that has always been present beneath the noise of the day. You do not need to hold on to insight. You do not need to remember every word. Let the teachings dissolve like mist at dawn. Let the images fade. Let even the journey itself soften into silence. May your sleep be deep. May your mind grow still. May your body restore itself effortlessly. May tomorrow greet you gently. Now let the words fall away. Let awareness soften at the edges. Let the darkness cradle you, and as you drift into rest, know that you are already whole. Good night.